Yeah, it's so many people. It's incredible. I love it. I'm so glad y'all can get a chance to see it.
Everyone's houses look so awesome.
I know, isn't it rad? It's like the best. Yeah.
Like a few weird ones, but like a lot.
Mine's one of the weird ones. All right. I think maybe we will just get started with this panel, and I want to welcome everybody. First of all, today is Book Pub Day. I'm extremely excited about that. Save Yourself is now available everywhere books are sold. I also have gotten questions about the Europe and UK. And you know what? I'm so sorry, but can you help me answer that? People who are watching from those parts of the world where it's also very late at night. Anyway, it's available on Amazon and it's shipping fast there is what I've been told because things are at different speeds. It's also available as an ebook or audiobook, which I would really promote. Like if you don't want things brought into your home, you can listen to it on Audible or you can get it as an ebook on Apple Books. It's also available through your indie bookseller. So that's what I would pitch the most. If you live somewhere and usually go to a bookstore, going on that bookstore's website and ordering from them, most bookstores are still shipping and you can help keep indie bookstores open. My indie bookseller is called Skylight Books. Maybe a lot of people are joining from New York. The one we were using there was Books Are Magic. And if you are somebody in the group who wants to know, like, hey, shout out an indie bookseller from my town, you can also ask me that during the Q&A portion, and I hopefully will be able to know who was our partner there. We have the most amazing panel tonight. I can't believe who is joining me. Each of these people, just one of you I don't yet know personally, but I've been watching your work from afar. And that's where I'll start, actually, is with Gabrielle Korn, who is the former editor-in-chief of Nylon, and then currently it's like fashion and another word director at Refinery 29. I'm making up your job title, but I think it's accurate.
Yeah.
Somewhat in the world of that.
Yeah, fashion and culture.
Fashion and culture. I would say I'm part of culture. Am I part of fashion? Debatable. But at Refinery 29, and then also you yourself have a book coming out somewhat soon. Can you talk to us about the book?
Yeah, the book is called Everybody Else is Perfect. It's personal essays about basically being a queer woman working in digital media and basically letting your personal life fall apart while you achieve success.
Unrelatable. Can't relate. What will be my entry point? Anyway, so thank you so much for joining me here. And I can't wait to get to know you more in the future and have you as a guest on my podcast to talk about that book. Also, this person and I stood across the street from each other yesterday and yelled niceties because we had not bumped into each other, seen each other from across the street. Mm-hmm. And that is, let's see, initially YouTuber, but now New York Times bestselling author and show developer person. Yeah, that's my friend Gaby Dunn. Let's hear it for Gaby Dunn.
Oh, hi. Yeah, we did see each other from across. We do live shockingly close to each other. So I've seen you walking around a bunch of times, and that's my claim to fame, is that I see Cameron walking around often.
One of your biggest credits, yes.
Yeah. I thank you for having me. Congrats on your book.
Oh, thank you. And your most recent book is called Bury the Lead.
Yeah, that was a graphic novel that came out in October, and it's very gay and it's very crime, and it's the selling points I've been told are like Killing Eve and Mindhunter and that kind of gay murder story, a classic gay murder story.
Classic murder tale, which my Audible is loading because I am excited to introduce our next panelist is the author of this fabulous book, Red, White, and Royal Blue, which you can see right here in my Audible. That is the wonderful Casey McQuiston. Casey, thank you so much for joining me. It feels like I have had a conversation about Red, White, and Royal Blue At the very least monthly, but probably weekly, even since we talked. So how's your life going?
It's an interesting time right now. The way that you and I originally connected was because my book somehow started to mirror our own reality of Harry and Meghan. And now I feel like the opposite is happening, where a lot of people are reading my book because it could not be more different from our current reality. Because it is just like for people who haven't read it, it's like just a very joyful, sort of upbeat romantic comedy that's like set in an alternate reality basically now, where we have our first female president of the United States, and her son, the first son, who's sort of a young Kennedy, falls in love with the Prince of England. So it's like a queer rom-com romp, if you will. And yeah, I mean, I'm supposedly going to be like working on more books, but it feels fake right now, you know?
Yeah.
But it's pretty good.
Well, I was directly before this, I was on a panel sponsored by The Wing to talk about my book with Amina Tussaud. I don't know if you know who that is. She has a great podcast called Call Your Girlfriend. And the number one book that she was talking about getting her through
Shut up.
This quarantine was, she was like, I'm looking for rom-coms. I'm looking for romps. I have a stack, and Red, White, and Royal Blue is rising directly to the top.
Oh my God, that's amazing. There's literally a Call Your Girlfriend shout out in my second book, which is also another gay rom-com about time traveling lesbians. So,
well, what a joy for me to be able to connect the dots and say, y'all are both fans of each other.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then finally, I'm so excited that you're here. I've got like 80. Oh my God, this is actually really fun because you talk, it'll be you in the reflection. Tegan Quin is here. Tegan is one half of the band Tegan and Sarah, but also a memoirist, a human in her own right, a full human
Thank
in her own right.
Thank you.
A full stop human. And I got to host an event for you and Sarah at Barnes & Noble here in Los Angeles that really did prepare me for going back and thinking about my book again, because you both were talking to me about encountering your younger selves with so much joy and sweetness. And I don't know if you could talk a little bit about what it was like writing this book, high school, and encountering your younger self.
Well, I think like probably most people, when I look at photos of myself in high school, I look back at the first couple years of my 20s, I cringe and am embarrassed of my haircut and the way I dressed and all the letters I wrote, my ex-girlfriends. And so going back to high school was definitely initially really awkward. But honestly, the more that I spent time with my young self and the more time I spent like watching the video footage and writing and interviewing all my friends from high school, the more compassion that I had for my younger self. And that's probably been my biggest takeaway from putting out high school, was talking to people, like not only from our community, like not just LGBTQ people, but just a wide spectrum of people's reactions have all sort of landed in that same place of, this made me think about myself while I was reading your book, and I feel like I had totally abandoned my younger self, and I'm so glad I was reminded of how sweet and full of passion and vigor for life, and how my whole world was ahead of me. And I think that was probably the most fun about writing the book, was kind of maybe carving off some of the weathered, like, you know, torment I've taken on as an adult, and remembering a time where I just felt like everything was ahead of me, you know.
Yeah, I love that. And it was really transformative. I mean, I'm being serious when it was really transformative to hear you talk about that, because it gave me perspective on writing Save Yourself. And I was thinking about my like much younger self, like my little teeny kid self. And I always felt so ashamed of myself when I was a young child. Like I felt a lot of body shame. I had an eye patch, crossed eyes, a bowl cut, glasses on top of an eye patch.
That sounds great.
So that right there is what I rediscovered, what you just said. Like when I got to see the pictures of this little kid and think about meeting that little kid, you know, me as an adult meeting this child, like I would have been like, you are my favorite child, but as a kid, I just felt so awful about myself. And it was really, it was really beautiful to like revisit that time in my life with some love.
Well, let me just say, when I was reading your book, I know I texted this to you, but for everyone watching this that hasn't read your book yet, I threw the book in the air multiple times while reading it and did one of those like, oh my God, like had so many moments where I felt so seen and realized, like hearing about your younger life. And I am a very powerful projector, so I can read an incredibly hetero story about a life that's nothing like mine and still project myself onto it. Like it's my superpower, but it was so satisfying reading your book. And I just think it's just wonderful to see so many stories from LGBTQ creatives coming out, and this panel included, because I've read other people on this panel's books.
Yeah.
Had those moments, and it's really just wonderful. And I'm so happy for you, and congratulations on this pub date finally happening. And it's so deserved because the book is incredible. I think it's going to do really well.
Oh my God. Well, I'm sweaty. I get, I'm the same color as my shirt. I'm trying to learn how to receive like love and praise from like peers or people I look up to, because I'm so used to like encountering an audience member. And when you encounter an audience member, it's like that person knows your work, but maybe doesn't know you as a person. And it's so different to receive like praise and feedback from people I'm actually friends with. I find it much more difficult because I feel like, but this is somebody that actually knows me. So like, it feels much more vulnerable. And so I thank you for saying that. And I definitely am going to work on receiving it. It is a process. I also want to go back and go through the panel and start with this question that I had, all of y'all prepare for today, which is like a moment that feels so specifically queer in the work that you've done. And I would, if there's anybody that wants to start, you can just jump in, or I can call on you if nobody is ready. But is there anybody that wants to share that really specifically queer moment stands out to them?
I'll go. Oh, Gaby, you should go.
No.
All right, well, we will start with Casey and then we will go to Gaby.
Wow, if you couldn't tell, I was definitely that like really annoying kid who always volunteered to present first in like English class, and I'm sorry.
Relatable.
I was like, but I like public speaking. Anyway, honestly, when you sent over this question, my first thought was like this one scene in my second book, and I'm like really sorry to be bringing up something that no one has read. But so like my second book, which is like going into early reads now, if for people who don't know about it, it's called One Last Stop, and it's the basic premise is this girl moves to New York and she falls for like this hot chick on her subway commute who turns out to have fallen through a crack in time from the 1970s. And so now she's trapped in the present on the subway, and my main character has like try and not fall in love with her while trying to help her get back to the 70s. But yeah, so that, okay, moving on. So there's this scene where, she's just like, oh my God, like, I don't know how this girl feels about me. I'm really confused. Like, we hang out all day, every day. And like, she calls me baby and we've made out a few times, but like, I just don't know if she likes me like that. And like, I don't want to make things weird or like overstep the boundary or anything like that. And I don't know what to do. And her friend, who's also a queer girl, just starts laughing. And she's like, I can't believe that you've fallen into this exact same like confusing homoerotic queer friendship trap. And it's the exact same thing, even though one of you is full on a like gay revenant who is projecting through time and space to be gay with you. And like, I don't like, it's just hilarious that it's always the same no matter what. And I think that like, when I wrote that, I was like, so many of my friends are going to like yell at me when they read this because they're going to feel personally called out, because that was like so much of my 20s. And this is like a very specific, like, queer 20s thing that I was trying to write, which was like so much of my 20s was these confusing queer friendships where I was like, what's happening? What is this?
Oh
and to like kind of project that onto like the most fantastical rom-com premise was like really fun. And I don't think I've had a moment where I've been like watching or reading a rom-com and I got to see two queer girls have a conversation like that and just like roast each other. And so that was just like a really fun like moment of like joyful frustration to like share with my friends type of thing. And yeah, that was the first thing I thought of.
That is amazing, very relatable. You know, Katie, who's sitting right over there, makes fun of me because I once told her that there were several crushes of mine that nothing had ever happened with. And she pointed out to me that maybe it was because I have never been the first person to kiss anybody ever. Like she was like, maybe you were supposed to. Anyway, just well, you know. Some of the things that pan out when you don't do anything about them is what I've learned. Gaby Dunn.
I was almost scared to bring up that because I was like, what if this isn't as relatable and everyone else has their shit together and it's just me and like my friends who are like helpless.
Not friend. We're all in that zone.
Yeah.
Time travelers all. Gaby Dunn, what do you have to say?
Yeah, you guys were being really cute and sweet. That's really lovely. I'm here to take it in a real Gaby Dunn direction. I was writing the comic book, Bury the Lead, and I'm working with an artist, and she's in Scotland, and I'm in the US, and so we're emailing back and forth, and I write the script, and then she draws it. And there's a scene where I had to write like a sex scene where the two girls hook up, and one of them's like this super hot, like shaved head, like butch woman, and the other is just like a little itty bitty, like cute femme girl. And so I wrote like they have sex, and then I didn't write anything specific. The girl drew it, and she drew it in a very like stereotypical way where like it was like the butch was the boy or whatever. And I got to give like my favorite note ever, which I wrote back in like a professional email. Here are my notes. Just like a minor note. So the butch is the bottom. and then the people were like, oh yeah. So then she redrew it in a way that was like less, because I was like, this is not my experience. And so I got to like put that in a professional email. And then the girl was like, oh yeah. And she redrew it. And I was like, this is great, because I was like, this is the type of thing where you are the creator. So you get to make stuff that like isn't just replicating straight dynamics, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate your distinction between who is the butch and who is not. And also, sometimes there might be multiple.
That's really what I'm here to do. Is like all of my work and all of my years is just here for FemTop visibility. Thank you so much.
I want to also ask, let's see, Tegan, I'm going to ask you, what's about a moment that feels specifically queer in your work?
I mean, when we were writing the memoir, even just in the proposal stage, I immediately volunteered to write the proposal and write all the marketing materials and like the sample table of contents, or basically anything to avoid actually starting to write or figure out how to write. Like I totally like Googled like how do you write a memoir, and also like I hadn't gone to school since the 90s. So Sarah jumped right in, and one of the first chapters that she wrote was about this character, Naomi, who was her first girlfriend. And the chapter is quite specific and vivid in the way that it depicts her first sexual relationship. And it took me a few tries to get through it because she's my twin sister, and it was really weird to read that. And I pretty much after that, like, dragged my feet for 8 months trying to figure out how to write my own version of that story and avoid it. And I thought it would be really weird not to include that in the book. Like even now I feel like I'm going to pass out. Like I'm dripping sweat. I might have to take off my jacket. Like I just, I've wanted as a performer who writes love songs about queer love all the time. I don't know why it's so awkward for me. And maybe this is something I can process in therapy and not here with all of these hundreds of people, but maybe this is actually a great place to process this. I don't know. Maybe tweet at me and give me some feedback. But I think because I'm in a band with Sarah and her twin sister, it's just awkward to talk about intimate things. Like, we create a division between us to allow us. This is getting rambly. I'm actually just going to Apple quit out of this Zoom. Congrats on that.
I thought you exit Zoom, so congratulations.
Okay, great. I'm just actually going to take this and throw it out the window. No, I think it's just really awkward. This is why I'm falling apart right now, to talk about even sexuality at times. And I think as a teenager, it was very awkward to talk about sexuality because sexuality meant sex. And to me, I would have done absolutely anything to avoid talking about sex with anyone, including the girl I was having sex with. So, which has pretty much not changed about me. And so I think writing about anything that had to do with my queer sexuality in the book was really hard for me. I felt like I needed to do it, but I wanted to do it right. And I wanted to do it in a way that didn't feel silly or too sweet. But I also didn't want to reveal too much about the real relationship because I didn't want the people I was writing about to feel exposed. So I don't even remember what your question is. Thank you so much for asking me questions.
Tegan, that everything you just said was highly relatable.
Great.
I even sort of shared about this at an earlier one of these panels, which is, I'm a stand-up comic. I don't have
you are
a prudishness with alluding to the concept of sex.
Yeah.
But when it's you writing in a long form way about wait, do I have to say where the hands go? I definitely do, because it's literally a public service to say where the hands go.
I felt that because it was Memoir, I did not have to do that.
Okay.
That I felt I was able to not have to. Mm-hmm.
You can. I think it's really a choose your own adventure on a level of comfort. But I hear you. Not alone.
You handled sex very well in your book.
Oh God, thank you. I handled sex pretty well in my life. I apologize. For saying that. Gabrielle Korn, can you hop in?
Move on to Gabrielle.
Save us all. A moment that feels specifically queer in your work.
Yeah, well, this is a tricky question because my memoir is so gay. It's like,
I've read it. It's very gay.
Thank you. Yeah, she read it.
And excellent.
Thank you. I mean, I came out in the first paragraph of the book because it was so important to me to establish what people were getting into. And my queerness has been so central to my work as an editor, and it's been something that I have fought to keep visible pretty constantly. So I wanted that to be really important to the book. So I kind of had the opposite problem in terms of writing about intimacy, where once I decided to make it confessional, I was just kind of like, okay, here's the inside of my heart. I'm just going to rearrange it and get everything out and then pare back. And I basically just had to think about everything in terms of what am I comfortable reading out loud to someone's face? That was kind of the bar I set for what I was going to say about my exes and my family and people I've loved in different ways. But in terms of the queerest moment, I feel like it wasn't a moment so much as the structure of it that became really queer. And that was that it's not linear. And I feel like that's a really abstract thing to say. And I'm going to try to explain what I mean. When you come into an understanding of yourself that is not the understanding of yourself that you are told that you're supposed to have. And when knowing yourself becomes an evolution over time, when you look back on your life, you think about things in terms of what you know about yourself now and what has changed and what you could have brought to the table if you could go back in time knowing that these things happened because you were queer, because that person was or wasn't queer. So I didn't want to just write this happened and then this happened and this happened, because it's okay, this happened, but now I'm going to revisit it 800 times through all of these different understandings of it, because I think that's how we experience our lives. You don't just move through it. It's a spiral staircase. Speaking of rambling.
That was
That was really good.
I'm sweating.
Like fury, Actually, I also have to say, just before we transition into, so in the next part of the panel, what I'm going to ask from all the attendees is you can raise your hand and I will call on you and we'll cut to you and we'll take some questions from you. You raise your hand by, if you're on your phone, there's like 3 little dots and you should be able to pull down the option to digitally raise your hand. And if you could also keep it to 1 sentence, that will help us get more questions in. But I guess I feel remiss moving on to that part without saying to Gabrielle that it also seems really interesting to me, to you, for your positioning, talking about how queer this memoir is, because so much of your work, I'm imagining as an editor, you're not the star of that story versus, and I get even in fiction writing, you're creating the world versus when you're an editor, you're shaping the world around you. And it just is really interesting, everybody here talking about their different vantage points. And I'm imagining as we move forward that there might be some opportunity to even talk about that too, because it's so different to be the direct creator of the thing and like imbue it with queerness versus to have a queer way of categorizing things or to know which things are relevant based on like where they stack in your life and that your life might be different than a heterosexual person in your same job.
Yeah, totally. And my entire professional life had been about other people and about giving them platforms for their messages and making sure that people who didn't historically have access to certain things like fashion felt like they had access when I was running it. And so it was really scary to then kind of say, okay, well now this is what I want access to. Like this is a book about me now. And it was like, even in the process of that, I had to stop myself from stopping myself. Like we're so programmed to say, no, like I don't have a right. Like I don't want to take space from someone else, especially when you're so used to doing that. Like I'm such a behind the scenes person, and it's like the scariest thing I've ever done.
I feel like actually probably everybody on this panel can relate to that though. That's what's so funny is like moving from stand-up to writing about myself in the first person, or from like, making massively successful pop songs and pop albums to writing about the way you felt about your hair in high school. It's all like, that is why I love talking to y'all, because there's so many intersections of all these moments. And I do want to go to our first audience member, which is going to be Rachel. I think your last name might be Lubert, which is an amazing, maybe it's Lubert. Anyway, you'll tell me. I'm going to unmute you for a moment and we will hear your question. So Rachel, you should.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Rachel.
You were right the first time. It's Lubert.
Awesome.
Wow, it's so great to have you all here. You all are incredible people. So my question is about representation. We all know how important queer representation is. It's what helps us feel seen and hear specific experiences similar to ours. But I was wondering if you could talk about, as people who are creating representation in the queer community, what risks and vulnerabilities and challenges you faced in that realm.
Ooh, that's a very good question. I'm going to remute you. Thank you, Rachel.
I mean, I've had people like when I write stuff, I've had people in higher up positions to my face be like, every character in this can't be gay. And I'm like, I haven't seen a straight person in years. Like, there's no, what are you talking about? I have one that I see out regularly, and that's it. Like, there's like a lot of pushback, I think, on where I was kind of getting resentful because I was like, nobody goes up to a book in Barnes and Noble and points to it and is like, there's only straight people in this book. Like, nobody would do that.
I'll do it.
It felt like very strange. You feel gaslit. You feel like you're crazy. You feel like people at the top are like, this is reality. And you're like, but that's not my reality. And they're like, your reality's not real. And you're like, I'm screaming.
I know that we struggled when we were starting to write the memoir, and our publisher was incredibly supportive, and they, never really pushed too hard on us. But Sarah was really an advocate for telling a story that wasn't all good. We weren't great kids. We were kind of bad. We lied and we stole and we were homophobic. And we used homophobic language at times, and we were closeted. And, I think that there's pressure on us as LGBTQ identified people, especially in public facing roles, to gloss over that part of our history because we're whether ashamed of it or we just don't want, I mean, there's a million reasons why we would do that. But I think for Sarah and I, we really pushed in our memoir to include parts of that history because I think a lot of us have had that moment in our lives and maybe we still feel shame. And there was an education process for us. There was an unraveling of our own inner homophobia, and there still is. And there was a time where we did not just come out, Tegan and Sarah were going to make music and we're just unapologetically gay and have mullets. That did not happen in a day.
My mom wants to FaceTime me, I'm sure, to say congratulations. I had to decline a FaceTime. I should have answered and showed.
Why didn't you answer her? It's her mom. Call her back.
I'll call her back.
Anyway, I just feel like it took time to get to this place. And I think sometimes there's been pressure. I know we face that in press when we try to tell a story that isn't necessarily positive about being gay. There's this but you guys are so this now. And it's right, but all of us here on this chat have had times where we struggled with who we are, whether you're gay or not, so that was certainly, we wanted to represent a story that felt a little more like the stories I know from my community, which was that it took time to get confident, it took time to become articulate and feel good and surround yourself with the right kinds of people and get comfortable with your identity. And I think we wanted to make sure that we didn't gloss that over.
That makes a lot of sense. I definitely relate to that. I also will say that, just as a queer person as somebody who's making work, I feel this massive responsibility to connect with and take care of and be honest and be responsible toward my community. And I just say that because it's a responsibility I'm taking on, first of all. I could just be a different person and be like, fuck this. And I just think that for some of the jobs that I do, and maybe some of y'all can relate to this, it's this is who I want to be. I want to be someone who's conscientious. And that also, it adds several extra layers of work. I'm very aware of the fact that this particular panel tonight is all white. I'm very aware of the fact that this particular panel tonight is all cisgender folks, to my knowledge. And that hasn't been true for our other panels. And when people, when I'm randomly emailing people and trying to get them to say yes to something from my house, it is complicated to always be the person that I want myself to be. And so I only mention this because, I'm a part of a marginalized community. We're all part of a marginalized community. And then we also do, triple, double, quadruple, 20 times the work of the straight, cis stand-up comic that doesn't even think about this stuff. And so it's not, the amazing thing is I get to think about it and I get to be a responsible person that's potentially, hopefully leaving the world better than I found it. But we don't talk about, as a community, how much extra work we do getting it right, making sure that our language is evolving, making sure that we're being inclusive. It's exhausting. And it would be so nice if anyone else was joining us in, bearing this burden, but it's really us, we are the ones doing the work to protect ourselves. And so I'm proud to be doing that work, but Jesus fucking Christ,
You get labeled difficult too, because you're trying to, different things that I've said in writers' rooms or stood up for certain things. It's quiet. All of a sudden, all the straight people in the room are silent. And you're like, anyone? Does anyone want to? No? Okay, I'll fall on this sword. And it's it is you feel like you are being difficult. And so you have to keep reminding yourself, you're not being difficult. You're being the person who knows the world. What am I trying to say? You're the person who understands what's going on. It's these people that don't get it. So
yeah, I hear you. It really comes naturally to me to be a lesbian killjoy. I'm so in that zone. That's my rut. Gabrielle and Casey, I want to ask you if before we move on to the next question, if you have anything specific to say in this area.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when I was the editor-in-chief of Nylon, I was the only lesbian editor-in-chief in New York City that I knew of. And I was constantly telling people that. And the queer people I told were like, oh my God, that's so amazing. And the straight people I told were like, who fucking cares? Like, they were like, what? It's like 2017. No one cares that you're gay. And I was like, well, then how come I'm the only one? Like, if no one cares, how come I have spent the past 10 years of my life listening to editors talk about their boyfriends at fashion and beauty events? Like, am I crazy? Like, and I think, you know, as someone who decided to be an out gay person in this world, like, you have to then also give up the idea that everybody's going to like you. And, you know, you have to be okay with the fact that, like, you're going to be difficult because it is on you to make room for everybody else. Like, me saying that I was gay wasn't about me. It was about making other people feel comfortable. And that's really hard work. And you have to do it every single day. And you know, especially when you are feminine presenting, you have to keep asserting it because, you know, people look at you and they think they know what they're getting, and you have to remind them that it's not what they're getting. So, I mean, it was just so, it continues to be such an important part of my work. And I can't really imagine at this point not using my visibility for those purposes.
Yeah. For me, I feel like, I don't know, I just think a lot, like, I think I didn't really have much of like a public or like a forward facing life before I was an author. I kind of like, I was like, you know, in my hometown, just chilling. And the deep, like conservative South, like deep South Louisiana, very religious environment. And so for me, the question of whether or not I was going to write like something queer was not ever a question in my mind, but there was this question of like, how am I going to tell my family that I wrote something queer? Because for me, like, I was kind of like still in the plausible deniability bubble with them, you know? And I was like, but I want to do this, and I want to do this completely unapologetically. And I also want to stand beside this work as a queer creator and be like, I wrote it this way because this is who I am. And this is like if you read the chapter in the book where like my main character is figuring out that he's bisexual, it's literally like basically an essay from my life with the pronouns changed. It was really, really scary for me to do because I'm like a pretty private person, like in my personal life, like with like, you know, I'm not like putting myself on blast most of the time. And it was really scary to think like, I'm going to go on a big gay book tour with my big gay book out in the world. And I don't know how people are going to be to me. And I don't even know like what's going to be like when I come back to my hometown at the end of it, you know? And that was like a really weird and scary thing of like, you know, marrying my work with my personal identity of who I am. And so because of that, it was really important to get everything spelled out on the page. Like, it's a book, it's a fiction book, but it's also a manifesto of like, my mom's going to read this and she's going to finally understand what bisexuals are, you know? And so that was kind of like a very intentional thought that I had in every step of the way. It was like, this is me, this is fiction, and it's also me. So it's kind of crazy how I don't write memoir, and yet here I am feeling very, very personal about what I've written, you know?
I want like the Hallmark movie of you going on your big gay book tour, and then you like meet like a hot person, and then you like come back to your small town, and like then like there's someone in the small town that maybe you have like. I want like what you just described.
Wait, so you're going to write it? Because like if you write it, I'll do it.
No, honestly, y'all could
also like adorable.
There are 400 people listening, and you're gonna get scooped. Like, I just mean, I don't know why you would give away this gold for free.
Like you sound like right now like a character in a gay book. Does that make sense?
Thank you
I would also say
much.
this
What a
entire
compliment.
panel
Oh,
is
God.
very much that experience. I mean, I would, I think that's true for so many of us, Casey, that we were creating the stuff that we needed to tell other people who we were. Like there wasn't like, I mean, this is actually in the book that I'm like, imagine being raised at a time when there was no Tegan and Sarah. Like in college, I had to, my like songs with my girlfriends were like, it was like, and I kissed her by the Beach Boys, because it's like, it's about kissing a girl. Like I'm like, this is like definitely the gayest song I know. Or like Dashboard Confessional, like hands down, that was like our song. David Gray, This Year's Love. Like it's like I was just taking any songs about like loving women and being like, man, fucking, I'll tell you who gets it. You know, so now we live in this world where we made the media that we wanted to consume. I want to get to another question. And that is going to be from Marie. And I think your last name might be Cazares. You're unmuted.
Correct. That was perfect.
Nailed it.
So writing is a form of expression. And I wanted to ask all of you, my question is pretty broad, but what is your most favorite or rewarding element of writing that you experienced in your work? Anything that comes to mind?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. I'm going to remute you. Rock and roll. Who has a writing moment? I could maybe start if we need a moment, if people need a moment to think.
Yeah.
Do it.
Okay, I'm happy to start. For me, writing this book was a living nightmare because my favorite writing moments are always with an audience. Like as a comic, my last special, Rape Jokes, I wrote like with a 100-person audiences. I traveled to like 8 different cities and I did 15 shows so that I, instead of playing a big venue, I was playing many shows at smaller venues and just trying to work with an audience to create a piece together. It was an amazing experience. And that's what I love so much about my work. And so for me, like canceled book tour, I'm like, how do I get people together? Like I can't live in that world. I can't live in the world where I don't have community around me. So I'm very curious because I bet there are other people on this panel that is not true for, that writing feels more like something you're more comfortable with as a solitary activity. This is a real stretch. Moving into writing as a solitary activity was, this is as much as I could stand it. I probably would write another book, but for now, done with that. Who has a great writing?
I have an answer, but it's like really depressing. Is that okay?
No, this is happy. This is happy only.
Okay, great. Let me rethink about that.
Give me that. Let it. Bring it real.
Well, it's depressing, but it is also hopeful. So there's like a passage in my book, because like one of my characters has like a dead parent, which, as some of us do. And for me, when I was writing it, I was like writing a rom-com, and I had just lost my dad, like not even 2 years earlier. And he was like really young. It was very bad. And it was really, really hard for me to ever express to anybody how that felt to like lose a parent when I was like 22 at the time. And there's a passage in my book where like one character is trying to explain to another how it feels. And she uses this metaphor about like, how like when you're born, there's like a floor that's like the depth of feeling you're capable of, and then something really bad happens to you when you're young, and it just like rips that open and like makes this like goes beyond the bottom crust of the pie into like this other place. And from then on, after anytime something happens, it doesn't just stop at the bottom, it goes all the way down. And that was like the first time I'd ever been able to explain how that felt. And it was like, I've had so many people tell me how much that passage means to them. And it was like, holy shit, I'm not alone in that feeling, because it was the most isolating feeling to feel when I felt it and when I wrote it. And now it is like this like kind of little like flicker of light in the book for me that like people kind of gather around, which I think is like really beautiful, even though it's really sad. So I don't know. That was a cool moment for me.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm just another human being, but for what it's worth, that's not depressing at all. That's like
yeah,
beautiful. And thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Are you talking? Oh, go for it.
There you go.
I was just gonna say, when I was writing the Bad with Money book, I had like the blank page open, and I was like, okay, I have to start writing, and I just type as I was typing. So I was like, okay, you just gotta start. You just gotta have words. Here we go. And I would just like, I overwrote it by like 20,000 words just so that I would have stuff to cut. But I was like, you can't. Someone was like, how were you like confident or whatever? And I was like, oh, I wasn't. I was just like, they're paying you. You gotta put words down. So like that's how I would make it. Like I was like, this is weird. I'm writing a book. Type, and I would say type out loud to myself.
What a dream come true.
Yeah.
So that's my advice.
Yeah, it's great advice. I know a lot of people have been asking how to stay creative during this time. I keep getting that question, and it's really the problem is that we're not narrating what we're doing enough. That's our big issue, and now I know what to do.
I've been singing everything I do, just singing.
Yeah, like joke. By the way, that kills. That's hilarious. I love it. Gabrielle or Tegan, you want to talk about a writing moment?
I mean, I feel like writing is so agonizing. Like, yeah, it's cathartic and it's self-expression, but it's really hard. And I feel like writers are always complaining about writing, but we don't really talk about like why we hate it so much. And it's like, it's because if you're not being honest, it's bad writing. And being honest with how you feel about the things that have happened to you is the hardest thing. Like it takes most of us years in therapy to be able to do that. So then to take those thoughts out of your brain and put them into words that then theoretically someone else is going to see. I have no idea. I feel like I like blacked out and then like a book was in front of me and it had to like my girlfriend said that like I would just be like staring off into space for like days at a time while I was working on it. And that's kind of what I felt like I was doing. So I think the high point was when there was actual interest in it, was after I submitted the proposal and found out that like people would pay like actual real money for it. It wasn't just something that like I made up that would just get like thrown out into the universe and that would be the end of that. That was so validating and so affirming of all of these dreams that I had that I had been almost too scared to even say that I had, like I've always wanted to be a writer. I've always wanted to write books, but until you do it, it's so abstract. So I think it becoming something real was the best part.
Tegan, would you like to speak now? Because everybody just says, I feel exhausted by just keeping up mentally with this panel. This is like a panel. You know what I'm saying? Like there is like heat coming out of the pan.
You're cooking with fire, baby.
Yeah.
And this is a question for everybody on this Zoom, but when you really like somebody and like maybe you already told them, or maybe there's some like, it can be any stage, but it's prior to a relationship, prior to the place where you feel safe and secure, and you craft like an email and you rewrite that email, like when you could spend like hours disappear. I've lost probably a year of my life writing those kinds of messages to girls that I was crazy about, rewriting and restructuring and moving it around and more powerful analogies, more powerful metaphors, and read it out loud and walk away from it and come back. That to me is what it felt like to write high school. A compulsive, addictive, repetitive motion every day to say the thing I wanted to say right. And so for me, I did not find it hard to sit down and write every day. We overwrote as well. But the part that was brutal for me is that when I do music in the exact same way, I don't write music with Sarah. We do not sit in the same room with each other. We don't collaborate. So writing a book was very similar to writing music for me because I write music on the computer as well. So, but at the end of the day, you have a song. So when my girlfriend gets home, I can play her a song, and she often will give me production notes and says it's not very good. But that's okay because at least I've had this exchange of energy. Whereas when she would get home and I'd be like, can I read you a chapter? She would look at me and be like, I guess, like, I prefer to read it myself. But if you would, and for me, I was like, I don't even care if you're listening. I don't need a reaction. It was the act of reading it out loud that I needed. I needed to have an exchange of energy. And I found that really hard because it's not really that fun to read a chapter out loud to someone while they're cooking. But the writing process was very satisfying. I got terrible hip and back pain. I had to move to decaf because I broke out in hives. Like, I think I'm a very energetic person. And so writing was hard on me physically. Like, I actually feel that I've picked up some I think something's wrong with me. Like, maybe it's like an adrenal issue. I'm not really sure. But yeah, otherwise it was super cool writing a book.
I want to be very mindful of my guests' time. And so what I would like to do is just one last question. And what I'm hoping is that this person can keep their question to a single sentence, and that then the guests, the panelists, can keep their answers to a single sentence.
Good fucking luck.
Yeah, good luck.
Tegan, you know what? There's two options. You can either answer in one sentence, or you have to sing the full record of which record do I want to do? Yeah. I reserve the right to change my mind. No, okay. All right. We're going to go to who is going to get. It is going to be, it's going to be Mallory. I think your last name is Schachter. A lot of great last names.
You nailed it. You nailed it. No one does that, literally ever. Never a teacher. Sorry, that wasn't a sentence. How did you guys find your medium? I'm looking for my own. I want to do what you guys did for me in your craft. So how did you find writing?
Amazing. Thank you.
I didn't have other skills. I was like a kid, and I wrote, like, I got a notebook and I wrote a novel in my notebook, and I was like, this is the great American novel. I'm finished. And I was like 6, and I was like, well, I've peaked. Like, this is like what I don't have anything else.
Gaby Dunn, thank you very much. Gabrielle Korn.
What is one long sentence?
Oh yeah, it was a very long sentence. What do you got, Gabrielle Korn?
Similarly, I do not have any other skills. My first book when I was 6 was called 100 Girls and 100 Names, and it was exactly what it sounds like. And I've been writing ever since.
Casey, what about you? How'd you pick your medium?
I hate to say it, but I don't remember anything else I want ever. It was just like I came out of the womb and was like, I'm going to write a rom-com. So I don't know. I wish I had a better story. I mean, see what you're bad at and then do the opposite.
What about you? How'd you find your medium?
I mean, until a couple years ago, I would have said it was music, and it was just because the second I wrote a song and performed, I felt like I'd figured out who I was just in that moment. It created this incredible exchange. And it was the first time I could ever focus on something for longer than 5 minutes. But I actually used to write before I knew I could play music. So, but I'd agree with everyone on the panel. I feel like you just know, maybe, or maybe it's hard, but you just know, and you just got to do it. You just have to, I don't know. Bye. So nice talking.
Oh my God. I still consider I will always consider my first medium to be live performance. And this is in the book. In college, I had a best friend, and that person encouraged me. She thought I was funny. She encouraged me to go audition for the college improv group. And because she thought I was funny and told me to go out. Like I did it for my best friend that I had a crush on. I auditioned for my college group, and like I got in, and I still didn't realize that comedy could be a job, but like that's what happened. And I will also say that she, after I came out, stopped talking to me. She was the first person I came out to, and she didn't talk to me for the rest of the year. And then I told no one else for years. And so that same person, who is the reason that I found comedy, was one of the biggest rejections I've ever felt in my life. And also eventually apologized to me, and we still have a relationship. And in fact, I like sent her an early copy of the book. So I say that because, you know, I think also as queer people, we talk a lot about our experiences with our parents, or that's at least the question that we get all the time, is the experience with our parents. And, you know, I rejected myself, like as a queer person first. Like my biggest rejection of my queerness came from me. That was the hardest person to come out to. And also my friend, she was terrible to me. Like that was an awful thing to do to someone. And she had the same, you know, Christian upbringing. I mean, hers was more on the evangelical side. That was all she knew. So she didn't have better information either. And, you know, what I love about this panel and what I'm trying to do in the world is create better information so that, you know, so that maybe somebody doesn't have that experience, or so that, or being honest with all of you that like, it wasn't all seamless. You know, there were bumps along the way, and with some people that I decided to still keep in my life over time. So that is my not one sentence answer, but technically it's my panel. I think I get to have the longer one. Also because it plugs the book. I just wanted to say thank you so much to Gabrielle Korn and Gaby Dunn and Casey McQuiston and Tegan Quin. All of these people are monumentally impactful for our community, and you should follow them and support them in everything that they do. I fully believe that. I also will say, if you haven't had a chance yet to purchase this, I would so appreciate it. Sales this week really matter too, because this is the week that you qualify for the New York Times bestseller list. I have no aspiration. I have like there is no thought in my mind that will actually happen, because there are no bookstores and there is no book tour, but I can certainly ask you. And so thank you, friends, so much for being here. To all of our panel, if you're in the grid view, please clap massively for our wonderful panelists who have so much to do with lives, and you have so much to do with your lives too. It's been incredibly beautiful to spend this time with you. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Cameron, your book is so wonderful. Loved it so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you, friends. You're wonderful. Bye.
Bye.